Good morning. Today is the 6th of Kislev and the 19th of November. And we're going to look at the first reading of our new Parsha, Parashat Vayeitzei, which means he left. Who left? So Jacob leaves Beersheba, where his grandfather and father were dwelling, to go as his mother commanded him and his father commanded him, and as he had no other option but to go to Haran, the city from where his mother came from, Rebecca, and to the house of her brother, Laban. And there he is going to hopefully find a wife. He's only going to end up with 4 wives. And he's going to come back after 20 years. On his way out, the sages tell us that he wasn't exactly running away in the sense that Esau was chasing him. Even if he was chasing him, it wasn't very troubling. There's a medrash that says he sent his son, Esau sent his son Eliphaz, the father of Amalek. He sent him to find Jacob, and he finds him, and Jacob says, since he actually had been studying with Jacob, he was connected to Jacob. And Jacob says to him, you don't really want to kill me, so let's do this. I'll give you everything that I own, and a poor man is considered dead. You can tell your father that you killed me. And so that's one of the midrashim that explains why the next stage happens, which is that for 14 years before he ends up in Haran, for 14 years he's sitting and studying in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, specifically the yeshiva of Ever. And this yeshiva, as I've talked before, I have a lot of speculation that it was in what we call today David's city, or the city of David, right underneath the Temple Mount. In any case, after 14 years, he sets out finally to go to Haran. And that night, after everything that happens during that day, he ends up sleeping on, if I'm right, then he just went up the hill, but there's a whole explanation about that. He actually ended up Haran, came back, and he ends up sleeping on the Temple Mount. And as he's sleeping there, he has a dream, and he sees the famous ladder, and he sees angels going up and angels coming down. There's all kinds of explanations for this. We're not going to get into this right now. We're going to deal with what happens when he wakes up. When he wakes up in the morning, he's struck by the holiness of the place. And he says that, the Torah describes it like this. It says, Jacob was full of fear, and he said, how awesome is this place? Meaning this is a place that is full of awe. Not awesome in the modern English sense, which is like, it's cool. It means it's full of awe. It's a place that causes you to have awe. And then he says this can only be the house of God, and this is the gateway to heaven. And then he erects a monument, and on the monument he puts oil, and he says, when I return, I will make this into the house of God. The Baal Shem Tov focuses on these few words. Vayira Yaakov me'od vayomar ma nora makom hazeh. Yaakov was full of fear, Jacob was full of fear, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is a very interesting thing. Why is Jacob full of fear? We know that Isaac's attribute is fear of God. That's Isaac. Isaac is fear, although his name means to laugh. Isaac's name, Yitzchak, means to laugh. So we have from this a very important teaching that we didn't have a chance to say last week, we'll say it this week, that the end of all fear of God is to come to a state of laughter. Really, fear is not something to be feared. Contrary to what has been said, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. On the contrary, fear is a positive thing. Why is it a positive thing? Because it causes a person to be sensitive. And the result of sensitivity in the long run, being sensitive especially to God, is one of laughter. That's the redemption. The redemption comes from that. But let's leave that apart for a moment. Jacob is now filled with fear. So what is he? He's connecting to his father Isaac. Jacob's feeling, his sensitivity to God, the way he perceives God, is through what we call compassion, rachamim, not through fear. Or through beauty. The fact that he says this must be the house of God and this is the gateway to heaven, that connects to beauty very much. That's very good. The house of God needs to be a beautiful place. But the feeling that he has inside, the experience that he has, is one of fear. So in that sense, he's connecting to his father Isaac. What is this all about? Says the Baal Shem Tov, this is called the unification of fear and the awesome. Or the way we would translate it is an overwhelming feeling of awe in the person, and then touching the infinite through the feeling. What does this mean? The Baal Shem Tov is coming and saying to us that even when the experience that you have is seemingly low, it's a low experience. What do we mean by low? It wasn't exactly that he experienced the love of God. He didn't experience the compassion of God. What he experienced in himself, his reaction to where he was one of fear. We always say that about these things, we can't control them. This is like a spontaneous reaction that a person is filled with love, filled with fear. We cannot control our emotions. We have whatever we have. But the greatness of what Jacob did was that he connected it to the infinite. Meaning he saw the fear as a sign of something greater. In other words, he's taking a subjective experience and he's elevating the experience, his emotions, to the level of the objective. The infinite here, that this is the house of God, that's the infinite side here, that represents something that is objective. That's not something that Jacob wants or doesn't want. It's not something that happens spontaneously in him. It's a recognition, or almost one would say, a taking his experience, his feelings, and turning them into something godly. You're saying, if I feel fear here, how can I transform that feeling into something that would have to do with the infinite God? This is a huge turning point. The way the Baal Shem Tov is phrasing this, the fact that he even noticed this, is a huge turning point in the history of humanity. Why? Because feelings are usually not to be trusted. We usually don't trust our feelings. Why? Because they're fickle. One day I feel like this, one day I feel like that. I wake up on this side, I feel like this. The other day, the next day I feel differently. They change. They're not under our control. As we always say, we don't really trust the heart. We trust the mind. The mind is objective. The mind is logical. The mind I can count on. Supposedly the mind is supposed to be consistent. If I think that 1 + 1 = 2 today, I will probably think that it's equal to 2 tomorrow. But my feelings are not that way. Says the Baal Shem Tov, we are now in an age where what we have to do is learn how to listen to the feelings and ask, how can this feeling be transformed into a vehicle for serving God? Meaning, if I feel fear today, this is not exactly the best feeling, maybe that's not what I wanted to feel. Can I use this to serve God? If I feel something else today I feel full of confidence. So instead of taking that and saying, oh, I feel confident, I have to turn that into some kind of vehicle, some kind of instrument for being able to serve God. One example, it says that on a person's birthday, their mazel increases. Their mazel, basically people would translate it as luck. Their luck increases. So how would you turn that, and I think that most people feel that way on their birthday. They feel like something special is going on. How do you turn that into something that is godly? Well, you say very simply, in general, I don't think my life is going in a very good direction. I'm not going to achieve those things that I thought I would when I was younger. I thought I would be able to achieve much more. Especially when a person is looking at his life from a religious perspective and saying, I really wanted to learn all of the Talmud. I really wanted to perform these mitzvot. I wanted to act this way, and so on and so forth. But life has its way of diverting me from my goals. And in a certain sense, I'm a lost cause. On one's birthday, you use the increased mazel to come and say, I'm renewing all my goals. Everything that I wanted to do as a young person, I now am going to recommit to, because I want to use that feeling of having more luck to use it to serve God. In the same way, if a person is full of love when he wakes up in the morning, says the Baal Shem Tov, he has to take that experience, that lower experience, it's just my subjective experience, and transform it into an instrument of doing good in the world, transform it into something infinite. Use it in an infinite way, meaning use it to serve God in some way. You can express your love to your family, you can express love to people you wouldn't normally express love to. You could also connect with people that you wouldn't normally connect to. All that is how you can use your subjective feeling to turn it into something objective. Why was this revealed only by the Baal Shem Tov? Really, there was no one who said this before. You should take your subjective feelings and transform them into something infinite, something of objective value. Why was this in the generation of the Baal Shem Tov? The Baal Shem Tov taught this somewhere in the 1720s, 1730s, let's say, maybe 40s. One of the great things that happened in the 17th century, just before the Baal Shem Tov was born, was a separation of the subject from the object. The entire philosophical world, because of Kant, one might say, but he's not the only one. There were many philosophers at the time that began to see the separation and understand the difference between our subjective feelings and the objective world outside. What the Baal Shem Tov did was, he took this tear or this separation that occurred in the world, and this is how people live today. Well, that's just your opinion. It's just something on the inside. And he said, if that's the way the world is, we can use this to serve God. In other words, take those subjective feelings, and even though they have no more value than what you experience, or only as valid as your life, take them and reconnect them to something infinite, reconnect them to the object. Do something that makes the feelings that you have relevance to the entire world. And don't just leave them as your feelings. And that is why Jacob has this feeling, and then he comes and says, and this is the house of God. I will turn this feeling that I have, a feeling of fear, of awe, into an objective statement that this will be the place of the house of God. This is where I'm going to build it. And everyone who will come here will feel this objective feeling that this is a place that generates awe, that causes a person to have awe from God. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow. All the best.